And then when the Facebook came in 2007 and 2008, I didn't straight come to the Facebook. I was late comer. I started Facebooking in 2009. But by the time, many things happened in my own life. I was kicked out of my parents' political party's female student wings when I refused to wear the face veil anymore, the niqab. You see, in my home country, there is an extremely sexist but a very popular saying: don't let your daughter study too much. They will grow wings and will fly away. That's the saying they say. I became an example of that. So I actually maintained my face veil willingly without anyone asking me to do since I was in year 5. But when I finished year 10, I was so much exposed to the world's literature, books, and thoughts, and the thoughts that those books brought in with them, and also my knowledge, the religious knowledge that I gathered from the madrasa, because I was studying in the traditional school, which is called madrasa. So I challenged niqab. I challenged the party and my parents that face veiling is not compulsory. I can see that in my books, and that I won't hide my face behind a piece of cloth that Allah did not directly order to do. They tried to prove otherwise, but I was arguing with them with the verses and the hadith, so they couldn't go further. They say when disaster comes, it doesn't come alone. When my parents and their party were devastated because of me, and because they saw their potential female leader in me, and they were trying to convince me back to wear niqab again, one day I was reading the book Anna Karenina at our party office room while I was waiting for the meeting to start. I knew they wouldn't like me reading that kind of book, but I am so impatient. I couldn't wait to see what happened in the next page. So I was reading but trying to hide the cover best, but I was caught. It was a serious accusation that came after that. Farjana reads red books. Farjana reads communist books. Farjana reads books that will brainwash not only her, but everyone in that office. And here I was questioning them again. What's a red book or what's a banned book? How come words could be banned or red or colored? I don't know how you put color to the words. And they didn't have a proper answer to that. I couldn't thrive in there under the constant watchful gaze and authority. It was too suffocating to think independently, too overpowering to reread religion and politics from different angles. Like a cherry on top, I was also asking another question. When the party talks about social justice, can it be done without ensuring gender justice? Why are women inside the party so timid and have to listen to every single order that comes from the male wing? Why? You know, if you can't start a war, all you have to do is ask a question. And the result was war against me. I was kicked out, as one can predict. I was declared the Western brainwashed, feminist, rotten, dangerous. And then when I moved to Australia, it was confirmed that I was actually a Western paid puppet. That's why I moved to Australia, a Western country. So later, when I got scholarship for my first PhD research, which I couldn't sustain without, I actually kept wondering if I am or if I was actually become one puppet. I had a plan to tell you about it, how being in Western academia frustrated me and still frustrates me so much when I can't write freely for Palestine or any revolution in the world, that the Western leaders and the policymakers who decide whether we will get our scholarship or not they don't like it. It frustrates me to see how I find Western academia just as a duplicate replica of my parents' party room. Don't ask, don't say things that we don't like. That's the rule. There and here. I had a plan to tell you that despite that rule in my parents' party, despite being kicked out, despite them hating me, I stood for them against the injustice that their party was being subjected to from 2006 till today. It was 28th October 2006, the day when the ruling BNP, that's the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and Jamaat coalition was supposed to hand over power to an interim government. Then opposition party Awami League leader Sheikh Hasina, who is now the fascist ruler of Bangladesh, was in a political gathering where she ferociously called out everyone present there to eliminate BNP and Jamaat members right then, right there. The whole world witnessed the speech and the action that came afterward. She asked them to eliminate the opposition party members with logi and boita, which is the oars and the poles. And the mob got so crazy, so thirsty for blood. On the spot, they killed 14 people. I couldn't believe that was my country. And they were my people, both the killers and the people being killed. For the first time in our generation, we saw a live telecast of Awami League mob hacking and slashing and brutally killing those BNP Jamaat members, and then dancing on their bodies on the road while the victims were still taking their last breaths. I knew then and there that I would never see my life or the whole world the same way ever again. And I had a plan to tell you about this, how I became an online activist, a political activist, who were constantly writing on social media against political injustice and oppression, and how that day changed me to become one. But my political writing activism was short-lived. Why? Because Awami League came to power in 2009, and after coming to the power in January, in February, they orchestrated the mass murdering of 74 army personnel, including 57 army officers, at one of the law enforcement headquarters. Those officers were invited by the Hasina regime to celebrate an annual event and was deliberately killed. Bangladesh, a country that is geographically surrounded by India from almost all sides, the army was perceived to be the only entity that can save the country from any potential threat. And they were gone. And Hasina made sure that they were gone. I had just come to Australia the year before, 2008. So when I was going through a very different kind of life struggles in my host country, Australia, that I never imagined I would face, all the struggles and traumas that a typical migrant wife goes through, frustrated, isolated, with all the shocks, cultural, language, and everything, wanting to commit suicide when even after 7 months couldn't manage to get a single job, any kind of job, no matter how low the payment was. But my country, my home country, Bangladesh, was going through a totally different kind of struggles. After the army, for Hasina regime, the only remaining threat was Jamaat, my parents' political party. It's not BNP, it's not the other opposition party, it's only Jamaat that they feared. Why? Because of the ideology. Because, you see, in the Quran, Allah has clearly said that if someone becomes a martyr while standing against any injustice, She or he will rise on the day of judgment as an honorable guest of Allah, with no sin recorded on her or his slate. Jamaat and its members believed that because it's a religious party. So the members of Jamaat hence never were afraid to stand against any political injustice carried out by the Hasina regime, because they believed if they were killed, it's a greater reward. They will directly go to heaven. And what else could be more scary for a fascist regime more than a group of people who don't fear death? The members of other parties may or may not run away when they are threatened, but Jamaat will never run away. The Hasina regime knew that, so Jamaat had to be eliminated. But it was not easy to eliminate Jamaat like the army, because you can't just gather all the leaders of that party at one place. Long story short, a political game was played, very well played. The whole country was fed the narratives of 1971 in a way that it didn't matter if Jamaat was the villain in 1971 liberation war of Bangladesh. It didn't matter what role they actually played or not. The nation targeted Jamaat as the only collaborators with the Pakistani military during 1971 war. Even Jamaat leaders and members who were not born in 1971, it didn't matter. They were all collaborators. So they came, So the name Jamaat ended up becoming the synonym of the word Rajakar in Urdu. It means collaborator, but it actually means, to the people of Bangladesh, the traitors. The entire nation was groomed to become bloodthirsty. The Hasina regime paid thousands and thousands of bloggers and social media profiles to develop a 71 narrative, where the nation ended up wanting the execution of only Jamaat leaders, no matter what. In a narrative where my father and his party were the sole target, and despite international media like Amnesty and other clearly labeling the trials of Jamaat leaders as a sham trial, 6 Jamaat leaders, who I called uncles, were executed, were hanged. The country celebrated. We, the families of Jamaat, who were labeled as collaborators in 1971, mourned. I kept writing in blogs and Facebook against this gross political injustice, the fake trial. I wanted the punishment, I wanted the collaborators to be punished as well, but not through a sham trial. I wanted the real collaborators to be punished. But it didn't work. No activism brought any justice for those leaders. The mob was groomed, the narratives of 1971 was constructed. Millions of family members of Jamaat BNP had to go into hiding. They were searched and killed. Their houses were demolished. Their family members were abducted. And if they couldn't find the Jamaat member or the leader, they would harm the family members right there on the spot. There was no injustice or oppression that you can think of that didn't take place in the last 16 years against political members of BNP and Jamaat and their families in Bangladesh. Extrajudicial killings, abduction, and torture became the norms for us. But I didn't stop my writing. But the day they came to take my father, that was the day I stopped writing. That's the day I realized you can stand in front of a rifle because you are ready to sacrifice your life standing for justice. No matter how scared you are, you will still stand there. But when they muzzle the rifle towards your family, that's when you see the chain on your feet and the tape on your mouth. They, coming and trying to take my father to hang him like his colleagues, it was not a new thing. Once every 2 or 3 months, they would come. They would come to our house and physically check if my father would move a little bit, because my father was paralyzed and bedbound since 2008. But this time it was different. They were trying to make my father sit so that at least they could make some arrangements so that they can hang him. They were asking my mother, all right, so your daughter lives abroad and writes all this rubbish, huh? While they were checking on my father. I had a plan to tell you how I felt at that moment when I heard my mother was crying on the other side of the phone and telling me, if they take him, I'll have to go with him, to take care of him until they hang him. To me, I was always a failed daughter to my mother, not to my father. I failed her politically because I kept asking my mother and my father and the political party that they belonged to Jamaat, why Jamaat did not change their decision of supporting Pakistan, particularly after the mass murder of Bangladeshis on the night of 25th of March 1971. Why? I couldn't understand why. Why Jamaat never asked forgiveness to the nation unconditionally for their support of Pakistan, and they didn't have a proper answer for me. My mother always wanted me to stay inside Jamaat and bring change from within, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't keep going with a party with such arrogance, never asking forgiveness to the nation for their role in 1971. I also failed my mother educationally because when the journalist came to interview me after my madrasa, the school finish exam, and I was among the top 20 nationwide in the madrasa board, she said to the journalist that I would become a female faqih, which is a Muslim jurist, a specialist in Islamic law, but I ended up becoming a sociologist of gender and religion, and she's still confused about it. What does that mean? I failed her when I took off my niqab. I still fail her every day now when she asks me, why are you going to Canberra? Why would you have to speak in front of strangers? What's the use in it? Such a waste of time. So I planned to tell you this and more. But then, 12 days ago, revolution happened. For 16 years, the country called BNP Jamaat Rajakar, the collaborator. I was called the daughter of Rajakar. I didn't get to attend many community events because I was a daughter of Rajakar. Again, long story short, after a series of many events, after 16 years of brutal fascist occupation of Bangladesh in the hands of Hasina regime, students in Bangladesh, regardless of their political and religious backgrounds, came down on the street on June 5 last month after a high court ruling reinstating 30% of job quota for descendants of the 1971 Liberation War veterans. And to give you a slight idea why students got so angry for that after that ruling, because according to that ruling, 56% of the quota reserved, all other students will have to compete for the remaining 44% of Bangladesh civil service jobs. And for first and second grade government jobs, the quota is more higher, 61%. So in every single quota reservation, 30% is constant for the 1971 war veteran descendants. Now, who are they? In a simple word, the 1971 war veteran descendants mean you have to be a member of the regime's party. Sheikh Hasina declared anyone who opposed the High Court ruling is a Rajakar. And me, who always felt highly betrayed and hurt and failed by her own country each time she is called Rajakar's daughter, and was planning to write a book debunking the political narratives of this Rajakar industry, suddenly saw with surprise and disbelief the entire nation got down on the street and proclaimed, I'll translate the slogans for you in English. Who am I? Rajakar. Who are you? Rajakar. Who said that? The fascist. It's a very popular slogans now in Bangladesh. So fascist Hasina did what she and her ministry do very well, ordered police, her party's student wing, Chhatra League goons, and the army to shoot the protesters on sight. On Facebook, just go to the hashtag that says Save Bangladeshi Students, and you will get a small picture of the big uprising taking place in Bangladesh. On July 18, Bangladesh was cut off from the outside world. It never happened in the history, in any country's history. Mobile and internet connection was totally shut down. No one had no connection with any family or friends. We, Bangladeshi expatriates, had not a single clue what was happening in Bangladesh. Some sources, through alternative ways, were leaking some gruesome details. I knew I had to do something. And I did what I do best. I started writing again. I used my social media platform to share those leaked news, to let people know what was happening inside. I became one of the voices. How the protesters were fighting with bare hands against live ammunition. And they were throwing up grenades from the helicopter on the protesters. They were shooting at point-blank range, mercilessly. The last 12 days turned me into a writer for the revolution. I can't be physically there to fight against the regime's goons and become martyrs, like thousands of others have already become in the last few days, but my pen is fighting day and night. I have slept only a few hours, each 24 hours since the blackouts. For 6 days and nights, Bangladesh went dark, and those 6 days and nights, millions of Bangladeshi expatriates all over the world could not sleep, could not function properly because they didn't know that what was happening inside. I did not have a plan to tell you about this, though. I rather had the plan to tell you about how my migrant life made me more aware of the lingering impact of colonialism, not only on us Bangladeshis, the colonial subjects, but also on you, the Australians. Here, let me use that distinction. One of the colonial masters. I planned to tell you how those migrant experiences impacted on my reading and writing, broke me into pieces, and again shaped me into this me. How I had to constantly face the distinction between insider and outsider, the East and the West in my migrant life. But I realized in these last few days of Bangladeshi students uprising against fascist Hasina regime, which is called the Arab Spring in Bangladesh by the Japan time, through the blood and lives that the Bangladeshi people are sacrificing on such a large scale, through the revolution that no one saw coming, I realized when we fight against injustice, when you are standing against fascism, there's no more you versus me. There's no more East versus West. No distinctions matter anymore, except one: justice versus injustice, discrimination versus anti-discrimination, and public versus fascism. Bangladeshi students are calling their uprising Boishomyo Birodhi Andolon, which means anti-discrimination protests. I call it a revolution for justice. And here I am, writing again, writing for a revolution that no one saw coming. Thank you.
Just so much to connect with, and also so much to challenge us with, and so much to take us to another place, and also so much to give us to reflect upon. And just so much courage and smarts and everything that we could hope for. Everyone, if you could join me once again in thanking Dr. Farjana Mahbuba.